We all set, Damian? Okay. Okay, good evening. Welcome, welcome to the meeting. If we could all rise for a Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you. Well, there is nothing symmetrical about this room at all, so it's a little bit disorienting. Those of you who have joined us through YouTube or on the web can't see it obviously, but everything in here is on an angle, which is kind of interesting. Item 3.0, recognition comments from the chair. Just wanted to say a couple things. First, just to acknowledge the passing of Anthony Morrow and express, I think, on behalf of the board, our feelings for the family and for the school community. He was certainly a beloved music teacher here in the district, and we will all, I think, miss his contribution to our community. So, and secondly, just to give my thanks. This is my last board meeting as chair and as member of the board, and I just wanted to express my thanks to all of you on the board and folks out in the community for giving me this opportunity to serve the district. Hopefully, I haven't done too much damage along the way. It's been a great experience for me, and a great treat. And I just want to acknowledge, I think, the strength of this board going forward. I can assure everyone out there listening in that this is a really great board. It functions well, which in this day and time can be a real challenge, but this is a real good functioning board. Everybody works hard, and I appreciate that, and the community should appreciate that. So thank you all for letting me serve as I have. Item 4.0, we have minutes from 3 meetings, and we can take them all at once if that's okay. So I'd like to have a motion to approve and amend minutes. Any amendments, obviously, we'll accept for the meetings of November 22nd, and then executives or meetings of December 1st and December 6th, which were executive sessions for us. So any corrections, additions to the minutes?
Steve?
Yep, Warner.
I just wanted to type, I think there's just a typo in the November 22nd. I think under superintendent's report, page 3, I believe that is, it says the ECF grant. I think it's eServe, I think. And then on the last bullet, we can get to later if we need to. It's not a typo, but Jennifer Rich Smith had requested additional information. It starts with that sentence, and I just didn't know if that happened. That breakdown, if that was ever provided to her on the category under other health impairment. And I think that's it.
Dean, that is ECF, correct?
Is it ECF?
Yeah. It's
Great.
It's a different grant. It's technology. And Jen, were you provided with that information? And if
Okay.
other people would like it as well, I could certainly have Justin send that out.
Oh, that was the hotspot conversation. Okay, I got you. Sorry, Dean. I got you. Okay.
Okay, anything?
Thank you.
Anything else? So I guess the meeting or the minutes as written.
Yep.
ECF is correct. So, if there are no other comments or corrections, I'll take a motion to approve the minutes. We have a motion by Bill, second by Lou. All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, thanks. Item 5.0, adjustments to agenda. Patrick, do you have any?
I don't have any adjustments, but you kind of stole our thunder, Steve. We just wanted to thank you for 9 years. It's the end of your third term, and thank you for 9 years of leadership, of your thoughtfulness, and just your guidance over the last 9 years. You've done a lot for the school system, but you've also done a lot for the community as well. And we wish you the best, and I'm sure you'll keep busy with other things. But on behalf of the board, I'd like to present you with just a card and also another token of our appreciation. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Steve. As just to reiterate what Patrick said, obviously you've been on many boards, and I just hope that as COVID things get better around the world, you can get back to Spain, because I know that's where you want to go. But thank you very much for everything, your leadership, the way you've worked well with the board, and really, you're leaving it in great shape, and I really appreciate it. It's been great working with you, and I really appreciate it, and I'm sure we'll see you around town.
Yep. Okay, thank you. Thanks, Lou. Thanks, Patrick. Thank you, board members. Yeah, I didn't mention that I have asked Patrick if I might be able to serve on the finance committee going forward. So hopefully he hasn't said yes. So there's a chance to get rid of me yet, but hopefully you'll see me around. Thanks again to everybody. Thanks. Okay, item 6.0, public session. Again, this is an opportunity for folks in the audience to address the board on any issues you choose. If you would identify yourself when you step forward, and just tell us, give us your name and where you're from. That'd be great. The board, again, our practice is not to engage in a back and forth conversation, but be assured that we are listening intently and do appreciate your comments. So, is there anyone who would like to address the board? Yep.
Hi, good evening. My name's Maureen Craney. I live in West Bath. I do have children that attend RSU1 schools, and I also am the president of the Morris High School All Sports Boosters Club. And so tonight I just want to come and just make a couple comments. I know that you're going to be revisiting the decision for the winter sports proposal or the plan. And I guess I just would like you all to consider, the kids, the athletes more specifically, some options. It doesn't necessarily, I know that there's a lot that goes on into it. It's not necessarily going to happen this evening, but to consider what that might look like, what we could do to maybe get the masks off the athletes. I guess I was surprised that you did accept the plan as proposed last month, because the plan as proposed would allow spectators to come into the building and remove their masks. And our athletes are really a more controlled group. We could, there are athletes. I know we're competing against other athletes, but I feel like we could very simply implement maybe pooled testing, or maybe even athletes would be willing to be vaccinated. Maybe there's an option. If you're vaccinated, great, you can take your mask off. If not, you got to do pooled testing. And if not, then you wear a mask. But I just do feel strongly, and I think as a group, the boosters felt strongly that if our athletes were wearing masks, that it wasn't the right time to be opening concessions and serving food to spectators, not just our community, but from, other communities. And ultimately, I want exactly what you guys want, which is for our community to be safe, 100%. But I do just really struggle seeing our athletes out there wearing masks. I'm not sure if that is safe, if that's the safest thing. So I just hope that you consider that tonight when you discuss that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maureen. Thank you.
I'll keep it brief this evening. My name's Tom Cervanis from Phippsburg. Last time I ran over my time, so I'll keep it succinct here. Yeah, I second that notion with the removal of masks. And to give you some hope, there was a study in Sweden, New England Journal of Medicine. It's titled "Open Schools, COVID-19 and Child and Teacher Morbidity." They followed almost 2 million students, and it was during near the first 4 months of the pandemic, and none of the children died of COVID-19. There were hospitalizations, but like I said, none of the children that are actually admitted for other medical reasons. This was just ICU admissions, not for specifically Corona, but they lost none of their children in that 4 months. And the thing about Sweden, masks were suggested but not required. So not all students were wearing masks. And the efficacy of masks, if you ever go on YouTube, it's thought that about 20% of your air is not even filtered, right? It goes through out the sides where it's not a good seal. So particulates are still expelled and inhaled even with masks. So yeah, they had one child per 130,000. And for teachers, they had about 1 out of every 5,000 educators had a hospitalization, which is pretty low. But just appealing to your humanity here. About 6 months ago, I told my daughter, I was like, have hope, we're going to get through this. I was like, just have hope, Georgia. And she said, it's too late. And so I was devastated. Those words still reverberate in my very being. And seeing what she goes through, right? When we have masks on, it's a symbol. Every time someone looks at someone with a mask, it's a reminder that they may have a communicable deadly disease. And we've kind of lost our humanity with how we interact with each other. So there's this phenomenon by a Belgian psychologist. His name's Matthias Desmet, Mattias Desmet. And he wrote about the phenomenon of mass formation, which is basically what happens in society when there's a crisis, that people lose their ability to see the ones suffering from the fallout from it, the lockdowns and such. So yeah, basically, I just want to say there's hope out there. Kids are very, very resilient to the coronavirus. And if we kind of just consider them and their psychological well-being, that it's not healthy to have these kids perpetually wear masks and be reminded. And I'll just one more comment. My daughter was considered a close contact. She's unvaccinated, so she can't go to practice or games, comes back to school for a week, gets another close contact, but her schoolmates who are vaccinated can still go to practice, can still go to games. And I think the policy should be uniform. If you look at Cornell University, 97% vaccinated. They had 400 corona cases in 48 hours. So I would have a uniform policy, either have it for the vax and unvax, or do what's in your best judgment. But it seems kind of silly to have this, medical segregation, for lack of better terms. But I yield back my time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks. Any other comments? Yep.
Hi there. I hope everybody's doing well, and I want to wish everybody a good, happy holidays. Hard to believe it's going to be Christmas again. I'm trying to be articulate.
We know who you are,
I'm
but
sorry,
if you could
Karen
give your
Silva.
name.
I'm sorry, Karen Silva. I have 2 kids in the RSU1 system. If I seem a little sort of off, it's because there's so many thoughts like swirling around in my head, and I feel like people are talking about the second wave of corona and I mean coronavirus, and it feels like maybe the 10th, but there is something that's really different about this one in that like it feels a lot more contagious than, and we're, you know, and I know that there are milestones or like canaries, you know, that we look out for. And when you look at like what's going on in the restaurant world or even the hospitals, like the positives for people that are getting vaccine that are already vaccinated, and how the old system of like, well, they, you know, you don't have to worry, they were vaccinated, you don't have to worry because they're in pool testing or they're negative, and you know, like his daughter had to stay home. And I think, you know, I kind of I feel really strongly about what Maureen was talking about with the athletes. I mean, we're struggling here, I think all of us collectively, on how to make everybody safe, how to make things consistent. But, you know, we choose to wear an N95 mask, but most people in this room do not have an N95 mask on. I watched a basketball game last week for my 9th grader, and not only did the coach have his mask down here, but like most of the players are running with their nose hanging out of their mask. You know, we play club sports for soccer. Our kid is masked up here, and then I carpool with another 5 kids not wearing masks, and then we go into a facility where we play with 3 other teams, and nobody has masks on. My younger son goes to the Y, and he doesn't have to wear a mask. And so, like at one point, you have to kind of step back and go, like what is best for the kids? What is reasonable? Like we can't save everybody by making someone wear a mask, but maybe in knowing that they want to play sports, maybe there are ways to say, you need to sign up for pool testing. Like Maureen said, you need to be vaccinated. You don't want to wear a mask while you're running around. I mean, the CDC actually thinks it's more dangerous to wear a mask and exert yourself than to not have a mask and be exposed to COVID. So there's always like 2 sides. But coming back to this new variant, and like, you know, I originally wanted to come and just talk about like, how do we start to relax like some of the rules that we have, because like the variant is like evolving, so should our, like the way that we decide to sort of mandate things, you know, or put protocols into place. And I wanted to say, you know, look, anybody who's worried has gotten vaccinated, and anybody who now has kids that weren't able to vaccinate to protect the people at home are vaccinated, and people are pool testing, and then the people that just don't want to get vaccinated are not going to get vaccinated. Hopefully they'll wear a mask. But now we're looking at something contagious enough that even people with vaccines are getting positives. And going back again to the restaurants and to the hospitals, you're seeing like the protocols that we have of like, you know, well, you've been vaccinated, you don't have to, you're a close contact, but just take a home test and just double check. Like that's not going to work anymore. And like the time between negatives, like taking a negative test and waiting 24 hours and taking another negative test, are adding so many days. Like there are hospitals that used to have like 20 people out a week, now 200 people out a week. Like, so again, I'm apologizing because my head really is just swimming with like all these facts. But I think that part of maybe moving forward is really understanding where the danger is at school, and potentially where the consistency could be, and how to say maybe put in place things that we know really give us an ability to understand what is happening in our school, like pool testing, right? And then think about where the policies have worked in the past with like how to quarantine people, and how more people that are vaccinated will potentially get COVID, to maybe get ahead of that and revisit it. Because cutting out that extra day in between the 2 negatives, or allowing like certain types of tests, I know that this is a slow ship and it's really hard to turn because you've got a lot of red tape and a lot of people above you. But just thinking about that stuff and where those canaries are, like the restaurants that are I feel like even our communication came from restaurants, like because they were the first ones to say, I'm really sorry, guys, we had to close. We got a positive case, but we're going to take care of it. And we hope to be open like in a couple days, once we make sure everybody else is okay. Like going back to seeing what's happening there, because they have a staff. Like that's my fear, is that we have a staff of teachers. And we all remember when we all went back to school and Woolwich had to close because they didn't have enough teachers. Like there were close contacts and they had to stay home. My fear is that when we get back from Christmas, that the new variant is going to be a problem. You know, hopefully nobody will be in the hospital, but it'll be a lot of positives. It doesn't matter if you're vaccinated or not, but how are we going to deal with like the teachers being out? You know, I mean, there are so many kids that are, we were just catching up BMS's Ocean Sustainability Night last week. There were parents complaining that their kids had been out for a month, just like his daughter, you know, because they cross over and they were out for the close contact, and then they went back and they got another one, or maybe their mother or father got COVID. A month of kids not being at school, you know, like, I mean, do we really want to go back to remote? Like, and is that something you're going to be able to switch on right away? I mean, again, it's swirling around, but there are a lot of things to maybe think about, like as we go back into the new year, you know, because I have a high schooler now. Like every day is important to what he needs to be able to do. And you know, he had strep, and of course they earlier in the year, and they wouldn't even look at him until we had a negative result from COVID. So the poor kid had strep for 3 days before they could actually like treat him. And all he could do is get homework. Like there was no lectures there. I don't want to go back to that. So that's why I'm looking for these canaries, right? Like what are the things that we can look at that we can start to think about more, you know, what can we do if we can in one fell swoop get all the athletes like on the pool testing, because that's what they want to be able to wear, like not wear masks. Like that's a win for me, because I know that those kids are already playing with other kids or going to sleepovers or getting in cars that aren't wearing masks. Like just because you're saving them, you know, from contact at school doesn't mean that the rest of the time that they're awake, that they're not like already sort of, you know, communicating and having close contact with people that aren't wearing masks, right? So if the goal is to get as many people pool tested, like wouldn't that be a great way of doing that and being able to really be able to take the temperature of what's going on in the school? And then as these like articles and reports are coming in about other industries trying to figure out how to work through the positives, this is supposed to be a faster, you know, sort of sickness, like it gets through you faster. Like how do we deal with people that are vaccinated and when they test negative again, and then how long does that take? Because eventually it is going to put a strain on the school system. And, you know, I would love for you guys to just be thinking about those things so that when it is time to make those decisions, it doesn't catch you off guard. That's all I have to say. Okay.
Thanks, Patty. We do, just for those who don't have an agenda in front of them, we do anticipate an update on health and safety protocols, and Dr. Hanna, I think, will be joining us remotely for that. And then, as Maureen mentioned, you know, a discussion on athletic protocols. So we'll be revisiting this twice, you know, during the agenda. Any other public comment? No. Okay. Item 7.0, committee reports, curriculum and assessment and instruction update. Patrick and Katie.
Hi, everyone. This will be my shorter update for this evening. Just a few notes. Lou and I, who had been leading the later school start time committee the past few years, had determined this summer that we were going to start things up this winter once school was underway, and have since talked and decided it's too much to be bringing people together right now and try to continue with that work and have principals and teachers be on a committee about the later start for next year. And it's not a decision we can just make without committee meetings with daycare centers and the transportation office and all these other groups. We would also have to have some larger community meetings, and it just feels like it's not the best time right now to try to continue with that work. Should something change in the spring, we would be open to try to fast track it. But right now, our plan would be to move that work to next September and start the committee up again. So I just wanted to share that. In terms of what our teachers have been working on, at their late start meetings on Wednesdays, as well as our last PD day, there's just a lot of, as you can imagine, curriculum creation and adjustments that needs to happen, especially if you think about at any given time, you have some, as it's already been discussed here tonight, some students doing things remotely, half of your class might be in person, needing to catch things up and learn to just differentiate in new ways that you maybe aren't used to. Last year, it was more about the hybrid model, for instance, at the high school. Now everybody is supposed to be there every day, but clearly aren't, depending on what's going on with them. And so there's just a lot of constant tweaking and adjusting and checking in with kids to try to make sure everyone gets to where they need to be at the end. The NEASC work, again, continues at the high school. There's a lot of subcommittees happening with different portions of the reports and self-reflections that need to happen. And Eric is hoping to have a lot of that, sort of the bulk of the big part for this year finished up with, I would say the timeline's mostly by January, February. So that'll be good to be a little bit more open in the spring. And finally, I just wanted to extend an invitation. The Humanities Council that Dawn Lee and Brenda Fagan have been running, that's all about climate change. And there's a different book, this is through a grant that they received, has been going really well. It's well attended by community members from around the district. And so reach out to her if you'd like to join and get a copy of the next book. I believe the next meeting's in February. And that's it for me.
Okay, thanks, Katie. Any questions of Katie? Yeah, I'm sorry, Lou.
Yeah, no, I just want to thank Katie for her hard work. And just to acknowledge part of the reason we're not continuing with the specific committee is it really is capacity, because so much of the administration's work is revolving around helping the nurses, helping the health team with contact tracing, and then there's staff, it's providing new staffing. So it's just, they're just doing God's work. I mean, they're just really doing everything they can. And I just wanted to say thank you, Katie, for that and for your leadership in that and working with all the other staff on that, because I know that's just, so it really just becomes this capacity issue, even more than, well, can you get a group together or not? It's so much more than that. And they're really taking on things we just didn't think we were going to be dealing with right now, and still are, and in some ways are expanding. So I just wanted to make sure to acknowledge that.
Okay, thanks, Lou. Any other? Yep, Anita.
I was just wondering how things are going with professional development time that the teachers are spending on some self-care and that sort of thing. There was kind of a tone in some of the administrators' reports this month that, there's some struggle going on. And I want us as a board to acknowledge that and hear more about what's been happening to take care of them.
I mean, we've organized some professional development to come in and do some remote things related to stress, during these uncertain times. And that will happen actually the Monday we get back from break, and another one near the end of January. We're also working with our health insurance provider to provide some services that would be unique to RSU1. We haven't worked out all the details, but where staff can utilize a counselor. So those are a couple steps that we're taking. And also, in addition, some of the late start Wednesdays where we've allowed staff to either work sometimes individually or with their teams, so that they feel like that's really productive for them, so that they can work on things that are, trying to, again, balance if they have some remote students, but again, things that would be the most productive for them to help relieve some stress and anxiety moving forward.
Thanks, Patrick. Anita, anything else? No. Any other comments of Katie or Patrick? If not, thanks. Item 8.0, Jonah, student board representative report.
All right, thank you. I just wanted to start really quickly by saying from a student's perspective at the high school, losing Mr. Morrow was a pretty big shock for a lot of people who knew him at the school, and he left a big impact. I personally took lessons at Midcoast School of Music in Portland, which he helped co-found. I knew a lot of musicians and his family also who were sort of in a circle. He left a big impact. I just wanted to say that. Aside from that, heading into holiday break, things for seniors are starting to get pretty interesting. College decisions are coming back, and I think the senior class even had 2 or 3 responses from early decision schools. So we have a couple of students who are already committed to the colleges they're going to be going to. Some notable acceptances. We've had acceptances to Bowdoin so far as a class, to Yale even. We had an acceptance to Yale, and to University of Virginia, some other places within our class that we'll be seeing more students next year, hopefully. Winter athletics off to a strong start. The girls basketball team really, until their defeat to Brunswick this past weekend, they had a 2-0 start, which was a really positive start for them after a couple of difficult years under their belt. I don't really know the logistics of the swim team. If Natalie Emerson were here, she would be able to comment on that a little more, but I think I've heard that they're doing pretty well. They've always been kind of a staple of the Morrison Bath community. I think after Christmas break, a lot is going to be shifting for students at the school regarding their priorities. Like as a senior, I know it's pretty much all done with college. I know the only thing left to do now is kind of make a choice. So I think more focus is going to be shifting on to midterms, which we're going to be having for the first time in a couple years. I think with COVID and everything, this will be the reintroduction of midterms and finals. So yeah, those are the next steps for the student body.
Okay, thanks very much, Jonah. Thanks for sharing those comments on Anthony as well. Any questions of Jonah? We expect great colleges to suck up our students as quickly as possible. So that's great. Okay, thank you. 9.0 Superintendent's Report. Patrick, 9.1 good news.
Yeah, just a couple articles I probably forwarded to the board, but just the hour of code that was kind of an introduction to coding at Woolwich and also at Dyke Newell. And then it has continued. Our 2 librarians, Abby Lukes and Lisa Hardman, are continuing to work with our students and help nurture problem-solving skills, curiosity, logic, creativity. And you may have seen in that article, some exercises are web-based, some are paper-based, some are using the B-bots that we received through a grant through the Perloff Foundation. So just a lot of good, exciting things to get students, excited at that age about coding and about computer skills in general. Field trips are, we talked about that the essential ones would happen, and we've had Maine Maritime Museum happening in the 4th grade, and we've also had in their Sense of Place program. And then 5th grade, the Gulf of Maine Research Institute, students have been going there. Giving back to the community, we had a canned food drive at Fisher Mitchell, which really showed students creativity, community spirit, and also some art that was integrated in there. The pocket change for charity, Adopt a Family, which is very, it's nice to see our students really giving back to the community. It's not just, it's not a teacher-driven thing. I was at Woolwich last week, and students were having a friendly competition about who could raise the amount of money and what it was going to be used for. BMS 7th grade hosted their expedition culminating activity around Oceans Night on December 16th last week. And again, it was focused on ocean sustainability and on invasive species, the green crab work that they do. And much of the work that they presented happened at Reed State Park, Fort Popham, or the Ecology School. And then lastly, as we head into the break, I would like to just compliment and thank our staff for all they're doing each day under the circumstances, the day-to-day responsibilities that they have to do to support students, but also involved in the multiple aspects of COVID-19. There could be contact tracing that they're helping us with, making sure remote students are being served, covering for their peers, which is happening a fair amount. And it can be exhausting and overwhelming. And I also would just like to extend our appreciation as a district to parents and also the students themselves, because thank you for your understanding and realize that this poses challenges to families, and it's a sensitive topic that we'll continue to talk about. So there'll be some updates under the things that Steve mentioned, that when we do get back from break, there could be some changes in the Department of Education and DHHS's standing operating procedures, which could help not have as many students out of school, but that's to be determined. And that's all I have.
Thanks, Patrick. Any questions of Patrick on his report? No. Okay. Deb, financial report?
Hello, everyone. Glad to hear, Steve, that you're willing to serve on the Finance Committee. We'll always have room.
You
See?
might not want to be, but
Tonight in your packet, we're looking at the month of November. So we're 5 months in. And out of our $38 million budget, we spent a little over 15 million. And this month you'll see the encumbered amounts for salaries. So we are encumbering about 15.5 million there to take us through the end of the year. And as far as revenues, we're at almost 18 million for our revenues. And so we're at 46%. Our grants, ESSER1, we're at about 80%. ESSER2, we're at about 78%. And these are with the encumbered salaries. And then the ARP, we're about 140,000 into that. And there's no salaries being charged to that yet. That will be next year. And then I looked at last month, I let you know that I would be looking at tuition revenues, budget versus actual. And the tuition rates at the state level have not been set yet, but as far as students go, we're 13 higher in students than what we had budgeted. So we're about 100,000 to the good right now without any change in the rates. So that's good. Salaries budgeted versus actual for what we hired in. We're also at about a good 100,000 to the good there. And that helps us as far as any retirees that come in, and we have to pay off that longevity amount. So we're in a good spot there as well. The audit is complete, and copies will be sent from the auditor's office, and they'll be available at that January finance meeting. And that's it. Any questions?
okay. Thanks, Deb. Any questions? Deb, have we closed out on the building project yet?
No, not totally. It's down to probably, I didn't bring that one report with me now, but I think it's about $500,000 that's left. And then when all that is done, the state will come in and actually do an audit, and we'll figure out what the total balance is at that point. We still have a few expenses with Crooker and some with Harvey, mostly
Okay.
retainage. So it's getting close to being done.
I don't want you to speculate. If you're uncomfortable doing it, don't. But do you think we'll end with a positive? When I say a positive amount, I mean we've underspent in the project or overspent. Do you have any
We will have
sense?
underspent, but not by a whole lot.
Okay.
We definitely will be within budget.
Okay. And the audit of that project is just the state's responsibility. It's not part of the audit that,
It's part of our audit, but the state actually comes down and does a full audit on their own to make
Okay.
sure that, and it's not as intense as when they came in and did Woolwich. Basically, they came in like 6 years later and basically went through all the books. But one thing that they changed after that point, now I upload to the DOE every month on expenses, copies of invoices and all that. So they're on top of everything throughout the process. So that final audit process shouldn't be as involved
okay,
as it was.
Okay.
So
thanks. Thanks, Deb.
they catch things as they happen. So
Yep.
if there's something that goes through that shouldn't have been charged to the project, then, we would know it at that point. So they
Okay,
look at all the invoices before they're actually paid.
Yeah.
So,
very good. Thanks. Any, no comment or no questions of Deb? Okay, thank you very
I have a
much,
quick-
Deb. Thanks. Oh, Lorna, I'm sorry.
Deb, I didn't jump enough, sorry. I have a quick question. Last month you mentioned you anticipated that transportation could go over, and I do see, what is it, 6% left in transportation? No, 49%. Is that going to run close, or do you have anything since last month that's alarming you on the transportation budget?
it still will run over, but we've also, Justin built into some of his federal grant, local entitlement, a dollar amount for transportation. There's another grant within ARP that's an additional about $20,000 that we'll use for homeless transportation. And so we're trying to utilize some of these grant funds to help balance that out.
And we have a little bit longer on that one, right? On the ARF,
Yes,
that's 2 or 3 years,
2 years.
2 years. Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you, Deb. Item 10.0, old business. 10.1, update on health and safety protocols. Patrick?
Yeah, I'll just start by giving, our usual percentages and then go into a little bit more detail. But as you know, we're still abiding by the plan that the board approved back in August, universal masking inside, the distancing that we can try to get at least 3 feet. And then, the typical hand washing, hygiene, all of that. So staff vaccination percentages are 80% or above at all of our schools. There's no, in your last board report, all those percentages are listed there. They're really not varying much, and we're not being required to report those to DHHS anymore at this time. Student vaccination, approximate percentages: BMS 60%, Bath Tech 60%, Morse 65%, and Woolwich 58%. And again, those are going to vary a little bit. As you know, and Katie will talk about this in a minute, the 5 to 11-year-olds are still in progress. So a lot of them got 2, but the 14 days haven't passed. And again, the families have to, we ask that they pass in their cards to our nurses so we can put them into our system. So that's still in process, but that obviously at the next meeting, we'll be able to give you the vaccination rates for all of those. And it probably will move, Woolwich's percentage up, and also BMS a little bit, and then you'll see the elementary schools be in there. Across the state, over the last 30 days, you can look on our website and you can go to that link if you want to. But over the last 30 days, just as an FYI, there's been 6,639 total reported cases, and 275 schools are in outbreak status. And then for us specifically, from November 29th, which is the day after the Thanksgiving break, until probably Thursday or Friday of last week, at Dyke Newell, we had 6 positives, which resulted in 16 school quarantines. Phippsburg, we had 5 positives, resulted in 5 quarantines. Fisher Mitchell, 2 positives, 11 quarantines. Woolwich, 10 positives, 17 quarantines. BMS, 9 positives and 40 quarantines. And Morse and Bath Tech together, 24 positives and 41 quarantines. Two other just things to mention is it's anticipated that the Maine Board of Occupational Safety and Health will vote soon on the state standards for compliance with the OSHA vaccine mandate, which is if you have over 100 employees, that vaccinations are required, or you have to show a negative, I believe it is, weekly test. So that's supposed to be movement on that very soon. And also the US CDC issued new guidance and criteria on test to stay options for schools when responding to a positive case in a school setting. And so the Maine CDC right now is continuing to review that, and also the current SOP, the standing operating procedures. And our understanding is over the holiday break that schools, the nurses, and administration are supposed to get a draft of the SOP, just to not really provide input, but just to kind of get a reading before it goes public, the new SOP. Katie, do you want to add a little bit more?
Sure. Okay, so we did have, as folks know, the clinic for the 5 through 11-year-olds. We had 2 clinics so far. There were around 125 students that we were able to either fully vaccinate or partially vaccinate, because because we had some students out on quarantine or with COVID themselves, they couldn't finish their series. So I'm taking a bus of about 30 students on January 6th to Midcoast to get to one of the clinics there, so we can make sure everybody has transportation in case they need it. So again, hopefully we'll have numbers for you for the younger students at the following board meeting, because they're really not supposed to give us their cards till they finish their whole series, obviously. In terms of, we are using some of our federal money that Deb just reviewed. In the nurses, when things really picked up about a month and a half ago, requested more help. And so we had the posting for 2 medical assistants, and I had one last week and a second one as of today. And so those positions are now full, and we have 2 medical assistants starting and supporting our nurses on January 3rd when we return, which is really exciting because they definitely need the help. So in terms of our pooled testing, the numbers have gone up of people wanting to participate. When the nurses and I talk about why, it's often people who realize they don't need to quarantine if they're in it and have found themselves in one, and then will sign up. And also, I think as the numbers have risen in this area and they get more letters, that has sort of changed things. In all of our schools, so the last time I gave you this, let's say this is as of November 1st, we've actually had 200 roughly more people sign up for pooled testing. So we have about 1,200 participants in our district right now who are in pooled testing. And so these increases per school are anywhere from, Fisher Mitchell went up by 15% over the last month and a half of folks who are participating. Phippsburg went up 26%, Dyke Newell 26%. So it all varies, but it's roughly, they've all gained about 20-ish% of participation by school since then. Let's see, I have a couple more details I wanted to share. Okay, going to these notes. One thing that we found, which I'm guessing some of you have probably also found, is we were at first only using our pooled staff as well from Concentric, as well as our own nurses, to just do the pooled PCR testing weekly. But as people have found it harder to get a test, probably about a month and a half ago, we did open up services. So if a student or a staff member fall ill during the day, they can receive a rapid test in our district. If they've already been out, let's say they get sick over the weekend, so we wouldn't have them come back in necessarily for a test, but they're finding it hard to get a test somewhere. And we do have sort of suggestions for the best ways to go about getting a test in the fastest way that our nurses will share. We do usually run rapids every day with our pooled staff around 1 or 1:30. at one of our buildings. And so we have cars pulling up, and our nurses are trained, our pooled staff are trained, and then a bunch of administrators are also trained. So I've done them, Jen McKay's done them. It really all depends on who's ever free and who's ever taken the training, just so we can try to help families get those results faster. Because if a student is feeling better or a staff member and they don't have COVID, we obviously want to get them back in the building as soon as possible. I think that's it for now. Questions?
Okay, just to clarify, Katie, so if you're in the community, not in school, and you're having difficulty finding a test for your child, you can come to the school and get that test. Is that?
Yeah, you would call your nurse, and the nurse would let the pooled staff know, ask the pooled staff what time their pools are done that day. And they end every day doing rapids for people who are either became sick that day in the building, and are about to leave, and they want to know the results before they leave, or if they're having trouble finding a test. So we don't have the capacity to broadcast and say, every student and every staff member who works here, you never have to try to get a test anywhere else, but we're doing our very, very best to help take some of that traffic out away from Midcoast and the pharmacies and all that, and try to do as much as we can ourselves to help out families and our teachers. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Thanks, Katie. Is Dr. Hanna? Dr. Hanna, what? Okay, Jen.
Thank you, Katie. I was just wondering, are we able to provide booster, the third shot too? I know that the high school students are now eligible for that.
I actually asked Midcoast, and they're just trying to they're not doing booster clinics in any schools yet, because they're trying to focus on getting all the little guys finalized first. But Jessie, who's our contact there, was hoping that she'd be able to reach back out in January and start opening up some more clinics. So as soon as they say they want to do it, I'll say yes. So I'll let you know if they decide to do that.
Okay, I just wanted to give Dr. Hanna a chance to add anything at this point. I mean, there will be some questions from the board, but do you have anything to add, Dr. Hanna? Are you there?
Yeah, I'm still here. So I don't necessarily have anything to add regarding this in particular. I think you mentioned that there was also going to be the discussion about masks that will be coming up. And I mean, I can talk about it now, or I can wait until then. What do you prefer?
Well, why don't we see if there's questions from the board at this point, I guess. Lorna?
This is for Katie and Dr. Hanna, since you're here. So on the issue of the home testing and the rapid testing and trying to get students in, which I think is fantastic. As you guys know, it is really hard for families to get testing timely. Rapid testing, you can go to the walk-in in Brunswick, and people are experiencing hour-long waits with little kids, and rapid testing sites like at CVS tend to be in Auburn or farther away. So it's great. We're trying to do that. And of course, some constituents have said, the test you guys are doing are the exact same test I did at home, which were negative. And I administered it myself, in the presence of someone. And I understand that I guess we're doing that because we need to have someone record the results. Thinking outside the box and kind of going along with what Karen was talking about is trying to preempt this massive surge, which we'll probably be seeing after the holidays. Has there ever been any other districts or discussion on having volunteers who are willing to be trained and show up and be a little more proactive in maybe more of a broadcast for families who are struggling, or knowing families are going to struggle getting test results? Has that been discussed at all?
Do you want to do the panel, Damien? I can answer. I just hired the 2 medical assistants, so we have tests, and if we can expand how much testing we're doing, we will absolutely do it. It's more of a capacity issue. In terms of the use of at-home tests, and I would love for Dr. Hanna to comment on if the thinking on this has changed. It's actually not, it is partially for recording, but not just because we need to have it written down. It's that in a clinic, you need to go and they know that the person getting the results is the actual person with the test. There's not forgery, let's say. I hate to say that that could happen, but somebody could say, yes, I did an at-home test on this person and they're fine. And I would love to think that that would never happen. But the SOP right now doesn't allow it. It has to be from someone who sort of knows professionally how to do the tests. And also it's the recording is so we know it was actually done on the person it says it was done on. I don't know if the thinking on for the SOP will change once that comes out in January, just because of the struggles with testing, because I think that's understandable. I actually also think, you know, having gone through the training myself and done it on people, is that it's not a hard thing to do, but it can be done wrong. If you don't go far enough into your nostril and make it a little bit uncomfortable, you might not get accurate results. And so that's a thing that's also something to consider. So even if you're not the one who's putting the swab up somebody's nose, I know that when I do it, you like narrate how it should feel, how far to press. So it's very different than the quick pulls we do with the PCR, because the tests for the rapids are not as strong. But I'm not a doctor. So Dr. Hanna, go ahead.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I mean, part of it is just making sure that the test is done the correct way. And there's variability. There are a number of different types of tests that are out there on the market. Some are the ones that we are using in the schools. Others are different. And those also can be very challenging to get your hands on also. But what it really comes down to is getting a good, reliable sample, and then knowing how to run the test appropriately. When do you read it? I think there's going to be a trust issue that's there as well. But I think it comes, it largely comes down to, making sure that the test is run correctly, the sample is collected correctly, and somebody's monitoring that.
Okay, thanks, Dr. Hanna. And Katie, any other questions of either Katie, Dr. Hanna? Yep, Jen?
I don't know if this belongs here or not, but please tell me, is it, Dr. Hanna, I've often heard when we discuss this issue that there are, that there's a division between what works, what's healthy for children and what's healthy in our communities. And I was just wondering, there's not, I hear that there's not a lot of school transmission, but there's a lot of community transmission. And I was just wondering, in terms of our school numbers or child health, are you seeing that from your practice? Is there a lot of more people getting dramatically ill in our communities than it was like 2 or 3 months ago versus children getting ill? I'm trying to balance how serious it is for both populations. Understand it better. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think our numbers in Maine, just in general, have gone up significantly. And when you have a large increase in overall numbers of positive cases, you are going to have more people, whether they're adults or children, who wind up sick and requiring hospitalization. And so I can't say that within my practice, I'm feeling like our particular district is doing worse than other districts. I mean, I think in every district, the numbers are going up. And subsequently, there are more hospitalizations. If you look at the Maine CDC site that looks at youth hospitalizations, the numbers are pretty pretty dramatically different. I mean, that doesn't mean that there are a lot where we've been lucky. Not if there have been 2 pediatric deaths, but there have been kids who've been sick. I mean, they had a person or a kiddo down at Maine Med not long ago who was in cardiac and renal failure, so heart and kidney failure related to a COVID infection. So it can be variable. I see kids who are really sick, and I see kids who don't have symptoms at all, and it's hard to predict. So I'm seeing all that. But yeah, I mean, overall, our numbers are higher. But if your question was whether or not we as a district seem to be doing worse than other districts, I think we're all in the same boat right now, unfortunately.
Thank you.
Thanks. Katie, you mentioned you're bringing on 2 medical assistants. How are you going to deploy those folks?
One is going to be full-time at Morse and Bath Tech, just because they have almost 700 students that one nurse is covering right now, and the most cases right now. And then Phippsburg will not receive support right now because of the 100 students. And Nurse Tainter feels like she's doing okay. She's hanging in there. And then the other nurse will be sharing time supporting different systems in the other 4 of the buildings on a rotating schedule. She'll be doing her training with Ricky at Fisher Mitchell, and obviously the other will be doing her training with Katrina at the high school when we come back.
Okay, so they're focused primarily or solely on COVID related interventions again.
Yeah, I thought you were asking who they were working with. My apologies.
No, well, I wanted to know how they were being used.
They will
but-
be helping with contact tracing, calling families regarding that. They will be helping do rapid testing. With every rapid test, there's a system called REDCap that we have to enter our results into, which is it's actually, to go back to Lorna's questions, were it not for a lot of the paperwork that comes with this, we could actually, our capacity could be 3 times as much, but because of every person who gets a rapid test, you have to fill out 3 forms on them and then go into the state's database and enter all the information. So they're going to be helping with that because that really holds back the nurses. There's also a lot of reporting that's done for every COVID case and contact tracing and contact with the CDC. And then finally, just helping, with some of the easier things that happen in the nurse's office. So the nurses can do some of the harder phone calls. They'll be helping with coverage with that as well, depending on what the more pressing issue is.
Thanks, Katie. Any other questions of Katie at this point? No. Okay, thanks. So still under old business, we have 2 very different action items, different from the kind of the discussion we were just having. 10.2, we have second reading of 2 policies, and they are both designated for action tonight. So I'll take them both at the same time, if that's okay with folks. We have the second reading of policy CB, which is school superintendent, and a second reading of policy CBC, duties of the superintendent. Do I have a motion to adopt these policies?
So move, Mr. Chairman. Move approval of both.
Okay, we have a motion by Bill,
I'll
second
second.
by Lou. Any questions? Yep, Jen?
Yeah, I think in the policy committee, we had discussed, I don't know if we had confirmed this, but we had discussed, or I had asked actually, item I, when it says direct and supervise the work of all teachers, I asked if it was okay to put in there building administrators or administrators, just to kind of make sure that when we're looking at revising this policy and the evaluation policy, CBI, it's not on our table, but just to make it, I found in all of these policies, there wasn't a lot of speaking towards the superintendent's supervising of building administrators, and there was a mention of how that works for teachers. and guidance, but there wasn't really anything involved with building administrators. And I have, often wondered how we find out how that process is working. So if the board wouldn't mind, or Patrick, if you can remember if there was specific wording that we talked about to change I. Teachers and administrators, okay.
So we're going to end on policy CBC, item I, direct and supervise the work of all teachers, and insert and administrators,
Yes, thank you.
and make such rules, finish it out the way it's written. So you okay with that change, Bill and Lou?
Yeah.
Okay. Any other, is the board is in agreement on that? Any other questions or additions before we adopt these? Okay, so we have a motion to adopt CBC and CB and CBC with changes to item I, adding and administrators. All in favor? Any opposed? No. Okay, thank you. Okay, item 11.0, new business. 11.1, we're going to revisit winter athletic protocols. So this is the second discussion on COVID protocols. And Nate, you're up.
Nate, do you want to start or do you want me to?
I'm sorry, Patrick.
All right, I'll start with just a few percentages and then let you go to the survey if that works. So last time we met in November, we talked about bringing back to the board for this meeting the percentage of pool testing for student athletes and also the percent of vaccination. And so we went down, obviously we play sports basically through 7 through 12. So pool testing, just to give you some percentages, pool testing at Bath Middle School for all winter student athletes is the percent that are in pool testing is 51.72. And at Morse for student athletes, the percent in pool testing is 47.86. And at Woolwich only has basketball as a winter sport, so their numbers are a little less, but their percent of pool testing is 66.67. And then if you take all the district total of grades, 7 through 12, the percent of in pool testing is 50.90. And then for vaccinations at Bath Middle School, percent vaccinated, again, this could be a little higher as a result of the clinics we just did, but it's 53.45. Morris High School percent vaccinated is 80.71. And Woolwich is 41.67. So again, if you took all of the athletes, percent vaccinated is 69.37%. Then we also did a survey. It was brief. We wanted to make sure we got a pretty good response rate. And I think we got 113 out of 140 student athletes, around 80% back, which was good. And I appreciate Nate's help and the coach's help on that. And so I'm going to let Nate just go briefly review. I mean, we probably could have been a little more scientific with our questions, but we wanted to keep it simple. So I don't know if you want to just kind of talk about the 3 questions and the response that we got back.
Asked was, do you have any concerns if masks were optional during athletic competitions? 92 of the total respondents said no, 21 said yes. And then below that, you'll see some of the sample no responses. So we left the opportunity for people to comment, just open-ended concerns or thoughts that they might have. Some of the sample no responses or no concerns, or rather have them be optional because it's hard to play sports with masks on, or I think they should be optional if enrolled in pool testing. And some of the sample yes responses were COVID-19 numbers are higher than ever, and we are in outbreak status. With new variants and increased cases, removing masks would be irresponsible and seems like an unnecessary risk as masks help reduce cases. On the last page there is the survey results. That's the opportunity for students to make some comments if they wish to. So feel free to read through those if you'd like.
And then we were just going to have Dr. Hanna weigh in on her opinion about continuing mask wearing, and then we can open it up for questions. Does that make sense? Okay. Dr. Hanna, you still there?
I'm still here. Yeah. So in terms of making masks optional for sports, I certainly would not recommend that at this time. You know, I think for all of us, we can look at the numbers in Maine that have increased significantly. You know, we have FEMA who's sent medical personnel to try to help in the hospitals. We've got the National Guard trying to create additional units to care for COVID patients. So we as a state are not in a great place right now with COVID. And our goal, I think, is to try to keep kids and staff healthy as we kind of get through this current surge and what may be coming behind it with a new variant. We're not even out of the Delta surge right now. I'm excited about the vaccine rates for our kids. I think it's great that we're moving in that direction with what's kind of on the horizon. We also need to be looking at booster doses. I think someone brought up, you know, do we have some plans for, you know, booster doses? And I think you guys have been very proactive about getting vaccinations for the kids. When we're also looking at the vaccine rates, I think it's important to look at the vaccine rates of the teams that we're playing against, because they may not have the vaccination rates that we do. And, you know, and though our rates are good, there are still a lot of kids who are left unprotected. In general, we know masks work. They decrease the risk of COVID transmission. You know, a mask is not going to be a 100% reduction in risk. Nothing is, other than canceling sports, which nobody wants to do. We all want the kids to stay in school, and we all want them to be able to play. But if we can do things within our power to try to make it so that they are more likely to have a winter sports season, and more importantly, a chance to continue in school without having to close or to quarantine, to be out with illnesses, to put their own family members at risk, and then to put our staff at risk. I think it's really important that we try to do those things. I think there were a couple of questions that came up as things that might be helpful for me to address. One was, let's see, there were a few that Patrick had sent me that talked about masks and whether or not its use offered protection for the person wearing the mask. I mean, the goal of the use of masks is really to reduce transmission from the source. So somebody who has COVID-19 and has mild symptoms or hasn't developed symptoms yet, it's trapping those respiratory droplets that the virus is hitchhiking on, so that they can't be expelled onto others. If you're wearing a mask, your mask will trap some of those respiratory droplets as well to reduce your risk. But the virus can attack through any mucous membrane, so your eyes are still at risk. You know, so if you have both people who are masked, that's definitely a much safer situation. So I think that was one of the questions. There was another question about masks being slipping down. There are athletic masks that are out there that can be used that have like a wire nose piece so that they're not slipping. And the surgical masks, some of them just have a plastic bar in there, but others have a wire piece in there that can be pinched against the nose to keep it in place. I'm trying to go through the questions that came up, so anybody want to interrupt me, that's fine here. but so there are ways to do that. I too was at the basketball game. I saw a lot of people who were putting their masks down, not necessarily that they were falling a lot, but I could see people pulling them down. And but you know, I think there's a way to you know, to get around that with maybe a you know, a different type of mask. There was also a question about wet masks, and it was interesting. There was a study that was done by some fluid dynamic researchers in 3 different universities, and they looked at the protection using a wet mask, both cloth and a surgical mask, and for different reasons, those masks remained protective even when wet. So again, I think, you know, we have this tool in our arsenal to try to keep kids and staff safe. And it seems like right now, when we are, when COVID rates are increasing so substantially within our state, now probably isn't the time to relax things.
Okay, thanks, Dr. Hanna. I just and I'll ask the board for questions, obviously, but I just, you know, a couple times it's been raised. Do the increased numbers of pool testing, how does that affect the decision whether or not to enforce a mask requirement? In other words, does one substitute for the other?
Are you asking me that question?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I don't think that one substitutes for the other. Right now, the pool testing is happening once a week. And that's a lot of time between when someone could potentially develop symptoms or become infected while you're still waiting for the next test. So then you've taken away your second way of protecting yourself, which is masks. So I don't think that it's a substitute. It's one of the tools in the arsenal to help keep the kids safe, but it's not. For me, it wouldn't make sense to get rid of masks. Plus, I don't know that the school could mandate universal pool testing for all of the schools that we're competing against. And whereas if we're wearing or we have a mask requirement, then my understanding is that when we're playing schools that don't have a mask requirement, they do have to mask up when they play us. So it does offer our kids more protection when we are playing outside of our community, where they may not have as much interest in pool testing.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Dr. Hanna. Okay, questions, board? Yep, Jen?
Thank you, Dr. Hanna. I guess I'm going to go back to the one I asked before, but in a different context. I hear often that transmission is higher in our communities than in our schools, that much of our transmission is called, and that makes people say, why do we need to do these things within our schools if most of the transmission is coming from outside our schools? Yet I also think that we have more stringent requirements in our schools: masking, pool testing, social distancing, quarantining. And I'm trying to figure out the logic that if we have those practices and less transmission, that to me that says that those procedures work, versus having lower procedures in the community and more transmission. But I'm just trying to use a non-medical logic formula for that. Is there a big hole that I'm not realizing in making those assumptions?
No, I would agree with you. I think that within the school, the kids have a very controlled situation where they, you know, there's some distancing that's happening. They're a little closer than they may have been before, but they are wearing masks. There's pool testing. When they're sick, they're required to stay home until they're feeling better and to get tested before they can come back. And those are things that are not happening in the community. So absolutely, I agree with you. I think you guys have done an amazing job in creating an environment where kids can be safe and healthy and go to school. And I think you have worked very hard. You and the nurses have worked very hard to try to figure out what's our balance here with getting kids tested with rapid testing. How can we do it there at the school to make it safe? I mean, so I think you're not taking a hardline approach. I think you're taking a very reasonable approach to keep kids healthy and keep them in school, and to keep your staff healthy and to keep your staff in school.
Thanks. Thanks, Dr. Hanna. Any questions? Yep, Jamie.
I just want to, just talk about, I sometimes wonder if we are as protected as we think we are. I really appreciate the work that I'm hearing that so many people are putting in every single day. And I really heard through the summaries from our administrators the same thing that you alluded to, especially with Eric's report. So I'm very mindful, and I actually think about masking a lot. And I believe in its effectiveness, but I sometimes wonder, especially after an experience from our basketball game Friday night, or seeing pictures of a wrestling meet where I'm assuming a mask maybe had broken off during the match and the picture was snapped. Are our students actually being exposed quite a bit during these competitions, but we don't have them enrolled in pooled testing to be able to know until they develop the symptoms? And I apologize, my experience, of course, is with basketball, the varsity basketball and JV basketball, and having competitors who very clearly were not respecting what our policy was. Coaches and players who continually pulled their mask down on purpose to the point where officials were seating those competitors after repeated warnings. Friday night, the gymnasium was stifling. Just sitting there, it was very, very warm, to the point where everyone who sort of walked past me or sat next to me were making those comments. And I believe at one point we opened the door just to get some cool air in. And I noticed that some of our players ran off to grab water that wasn't there, and then they started sharing water bottles. So the exposure from Friday night, I think, was pretty significant, where what I did see from Morse High athletes was that they were following what we had asked them to do. At the end of the game, the environment was so loud, it did require coaches and players to pull down their mask, to yell, to try to communicate with one another. And so I wonder sometimes, yes, we have a mask mandate, but Friday night, it seemed like, it definitely gave me pause. And I wondered, are we as protected as we think we are? Could we be even more protected if they were in pooled testing? Of course, yes. How do we get them to take that next step? I loved seeing that we had so many athletes that were vaccinated, and I hope to see the numbers for younger students continue to increase, since we've been putting so much work into getting them vaccinated. I wish we could just get everybody vaccinated and into pooled testing, and then we probably could not be talking about masks as much. But even, looking Saturday's Portland Press Herald, the entire sports section for varsity sports, it was the same thing. The masks were down. So I think it's happening across the board. It's not just something here that we are dealing with. So I don't know what the answer is. I think my mind is swimming, as Karen mentioned earlier. I've been thinking about it nonstop, and I try to think about what is the balance, and how much are we asking of our young people on a day where, you know, some of them left their keys in the ignition because of the threats of against the school, or emptied the books out of their backpack so that they could run faster. It all has a cost, I think, mentally, as well as obviously physically. I don't know what the answer is, but I guess, Dr. Hanna, would like to hear from you. I'm sure you probably witnessed similar things to what I witnessed on Friday night. Were we as protected as we maybe think we were with the masks during that couple of hours?
Were we as protected as we could have been? Absolutely not. A lot of people were wearing their masks, and I agree with you that I think our team did a really good job keeping their masks on appropriately. I think that so I don't know who makes the changes. I was shocked that the other team had their masks pulled down during warm-ups. I was frustrated, and I know that our athletic director tried to intervene. And so does this become an issue that's brought up with the refs or the officials that are there so that they have a better handle on this? Is it something that is outlined better before players come to our schools to participate in competitions, so that everything is outlined that, okay, masks are required at all times? So could we have been better protected? 100%. Well, yes, we could have. There was inconsistency in terms of mask use there. So I agree with you. But at the same time, I do think that we were a whole lot better off than we would have been had people not been wearing their masks.
Thank you.
Nate, I mean, you know, with the situation that Jamie and Dr. Hanna just described, I mean, what's our response to that?
So the response is I do communicate ahead of time to each school that is coming. You know, these are our protocols, these are our expectations. Masking is required by spectators, athletes, coaches, etc. So that communication does go out. And then the second piece, to Dr. Hanna's point, officials are really in charge of what happens on the floor, the basketball game specifically. They're treating masking like a uniform violation. You know, an untucked shirt would be the same as not having your mask on correctly. So they'll give you a warning and then send you to the bench. And that's a conversation that I have with the officials prior to each game, whether it's a freshman, JV, or varsity game. I say, these are our expectations here. We are requiring masking of everybody. You know, please do your job and enforce that. And for the most part, I think they've done pretty well with it. It's not a perfect scenario. If a boy's dribbling down the court, or a girl for that matter, and their mask falls down below their nose, the official's not going to call a timeout at that point. You know, they'll ask them to adjust it at the next possible timeout or stop and clock. So it hasn't been perfect by any means, you know, this season, but I think it has been overall, at least my observations and how our team has been, I think we've done a pretty good job.
Okay, thanks, Nate. Jen?
Dr. Hanna, there's so many studies and so many things to read upon, but I heard tonight someone say that the CDC says it's more dangerous to wear a mask while participating in a sport than it's not. And I know I've heard many sightings of information about what it's like for the person wearing the mask while they're doing physical exertion, but not thinking that you have read every single CDC report. Could you help me understand that a little better, please?
I can. Yeah, so they have done many, many studies looking at the safety of masks while exercising, but the CDC has identified certain times when masks should not be worn. Gymnastics cheering when they're doing the flying. And in those two situations, it's because there is a concern that if the mask slipped over the eyes, they would not be able to determine where they are in relation to where they're supposed to be landing, and so that they are at risk for physical injury then. And then for swimming. So those are the times when the CDC has identified that masks should not be worn. Wrestling has come up, and what they have determined is that as long as you have an official or a coach monitoring to make sure that the mask is not becoming a danger, then they can be used during wrestling. For all other sports, it's recommended that they use it or use them. And that's also supported by the American Academy of Pediatrics as well. I mean, so there are a number of different organizations, but yeah, there are 3 specific instances when they should not be used.
Okay, thanks. Lorna?
I think Jamie did a good job going over Friday night, so I don't need to get into that. It was pretty shocking, and I think that, and I am hearing and fully understand and also advocate masking if done appropriately. But I think we're back to kind of risk assessment, right? Because we want kids to pool test. I'm not hearing that we have any capacity worries if they're actually enrolled in the program. So we're not discouraging that because of capacity. We have the potential to have 58 athletes in pool testing. It's only done once a week. I understand that. But we have the opportunity from 58 bodies to catch something early, because my understanding is that we could actually catch it before it becomes contagious. So when I hear that, and then I understand very clearly that we do not have a bulletproof masking policy in athletics. And if you look at CDC and it talks about the efficacy of a mask being well-fitting over the nose and mouth, not being touched, we're clearly not meeting that. So if we could just ask ourselves, I think someone here said, just look at the humanity of it. It's not that I don't agree in masking, but my struggle is if we give up something to gain something more is my struggle. Not that I don't believe in science, but I don't know how we police masking in athletics better than, I just don't know how we do it. I think the spectators as a whole did an okay job. I think there was a lot of people in the gym. Maybe it's something we need to talk about. But for the athletes themselves, we know they're going to slide down. We're hearing that the ref might not necessarily stop the game. We already know there's going to be exposure during the game. We're hearing that if you wear one yourself, that isn't going to protect you 100%. So I just really want to think about that as we go forward. What are we willing to lose maybe to gain something else? I think people who are vaccinated are vaccinated. I would love to see the numbers go up, but the current messaging isn't working to change anyone's minds right now. I'd love it to be different. I really would. So those are just my comments. I don't know the answer either. But if I wasn't sitting here knowing that our masking is far from perfect in athletics, it would be different. And I really want kids to pool test it for our family. I had one that signed up right away. I had one that was very resistant until she got a cold and realized what a pain it was to get a test. So it's like a litmus test for our family every week. And even though it's only good for a few days after, it's just so comforting to know, okay, we're good for a week. If we could get that from 58 other kids, that just seems like such a big win. So anyway, that's my 2 cents on it. I don't know the answer. I'm afraid of what's coming down the pike. I do think our kids, we can all say we're doing such a great job. They're doing a great job. They go out into the world and it's like there is no COVID in some places. So I'm worried about the mental toll. I'm with Jamie on the other things that came up last week. It's like, what else are they going to have to navigate? So I just want to be smart about our decision. It doesn't mean I'm ignoring science. But what do we want? We want kids pool testing and vaccinating. And so that's what I'm struggling with the most. But I do appreciate your time and I do respect your opinion and your professional advice. It's just hard.
Thanks, Lorna. Any other board members want to comment? Go ahead, Jen.
I would like for us to address the issue of like the impact of having spectators or having that many spectators. If people can't, if the noise level is so high that people have to take their masks down to be heard, maybe we have to reduce the noise level. If it's so many people in a hot place where people are trying to get overheated plus wear a mask, maybe we need to reduce the spectator level. I mean, I'm not saying get rid of it completely, but maybe the refs would be able to, maybe all the other staff, if there's less spectators, maybe they could be more available to be focusing on keeping the masks on the players. And I also want to say that I respect the fact that if we're asking our players to mask, that we probably shouldn't be allowing adults to be unmasked just to get a concession. So I think that is something that we should address, that if we're really trying to do this, and masking is something that we're trying to do to help our communities and our schools and everybody, and we can't control the pool testing of the opponents or the vaccination or the knowledge of what they're going to bring into our communities, maybe we have to say the best we can do with this is not have the spectators and not have anything else, but have all of our staff focused on making sure the refs are making sure the masks are on, and also maybe supplying our students, our athletes with better masks. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Jen. Yeah, I just, Nate, are you, I know, from reading mostly newspaper accounts that some districts do limit the number of spectators attending games. In some districts, they assign, everybody can have 4 people come or something like that. I mean, it's done in a very rigid sort of way. I mean, do you have any sense of how many of what those practices are in other districts across the state? Or maybe you could get that information
Sure.
and let us know.
I could get that information. I don't know off the top of my head. I do know that there are districts who, for example, allow 4 tickets per athlete or something like that, and that's a voucher that will get you into the game. I will say I hadn't considered limiting spectators. The first 2 home basketball events that we had, I think, were very successful. The spectators, there weren't a lot of them, but then Friday night certainly changed my thoughts on that a little bit. We were very, very full. We weren't at capacity, but we were very full. We certainly did have some masking issues with our crowd. So if that's something that wants to be addressed tonight, certainly happy to listen to that.
And
Well, I think, Nate, I think going forward, at the least, would be, we know who our rivals are, the 2 closest districts to us. And I think that may be the conversation to have, because that's what happened on Friday night, right? And the other 2, will be our typical probably draw of a crowd, right? Which was manageable for you.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And the other comment, or just if you would comment, just kind of building on what Jamie and Lorna and Jen have said, I guess. Do you know if the Maine Principals Association is anticipating any changes based on the experience that some districts, like, such as our experience? I mean, have you heard of any discussion at that level? I still feel that it's unbelievable to me that these state bodies that govern these activities at the district level aren't providing clearer guidance on how individual districts should function, here. I mean, there are however many districts there are in the state, there's a different set of protocols that apply in some ways. I mean, not, the protocols might not be major differences, but there are differences. And to the extent that the Maine Principals Association hasn't tried to come to grips with this is just, I don't know, I just can't fathom it. But have you heard of any conversations at that level?
I haven't. I'd be
Okay.
surprised if they came out mid-season, but I haven't heard anything either way.
Yeah. And then just one last question, and then other board members. Are you aware of any, there are districts out there that are mandating pool testing for their athletes?
They are, yep. There's 2 districts off the top of my head that I can think of that are.
You know?
Yep.
And what are most of our athletes already participate in pool testing. I'm not talking about vaccinations. I'm talking about a far less invasive testing protocol. I mean, do you have any thoughts on that? Or maybe Dr. Hanna has thoughts on that. You're right. It's a layered, it's a layered protection. And the more layers we can provide, the better off we are. If masking is hit or miss for obvious reasons in the heat of an athletic competition, and if we can ask that our athletes be pool tested at least, doesn't that help us?
I would defer
I
to
would say
Dr.
that
on that.
Yeah, I
What's
mean,
that?
it definitely helps us, but it's not, I wouldn't say that having all of the kids involved in pool testing is a substitute for masking. Does it help us? Yes. Everything that we can do to try to detect early and reduce exposure is going to be a layer in our protection. But I wouldn't consider once a week pool testing to be a substitute for masking.
No, I'm not. You've already changed my mind on that. I mean, I'm not looking at it as a substitute for masking, but as an additional layer. So
Absolutely,
again,
I think it would
maybe,
be great.
yeah. Again, maybe Nate, if you get a sense for us of how many districts do require pool testing.
I knew 2 off the top of my head is one is
Okay.
Augusta, Coney. They require mass and pool testing, and I believe Portland does as well.
Okay. There are risks to all that, I know, in terms of the community's reaction. There's a reason why those students haven't signed up for pool testing, and we have to be sensitive to those reasons. But on the other hand, I feel we need to be sensitive to the overall health of our student population. But anyways, other comments from the board? Yeah, Jamie?
Could I just clarify, do we typically provide water to athletes?
Typically, yes. Yep. I don't know why it wasn't available at that time, but normally, yes.
Just, if we're asking people to mask and it's 90 degrees in there and there's no water and the water fountains are shut down, like something's got to give, I think. And we heard from a lot of parents in the beginning of the year about the lack of mask breaks that had been really detrimental to some students. And I wonder if there is a way safely to provide athletes with that same opportunity to take a mask break. But I don't even know how you would do that because there's so many teammates and coaches and you have to still communicate. But just trying to think of other ways to help people feel better about masking.
So just to respond to that, Jamie, last year we did have an area, specifically a basketball, where we basically coned it off and an athlete could go there when they needed to and take their mask off, have some water, and it was spaced out enough to not be any worry. But we did that last year pretty successfully.
Okay, Jen?
But Nate, that was when there were no spectators, right?
Correct. Yep.
Lou?
Okay, so there's obviously there's a lot going on here. Obviously, it's not a substitution if you were to take away or make masks optional if people were to pool test. So you're saying we could mandate pool testing? That's an option for us?
Perhaps. Yep.
So we could mandate pool testing, and obviously then if they're pool testing you could make masks optional when they're on the court, not when they're on the bench, not when they're on the bus, just when they're in the court. I do understand that would mean if, I don't know how many of the schools we play are mandating masks, because obviously if the other school did, just like if we're the school that mandates it, the masks, everyone has to wear masks. So we'd still be wearing masks some of the time, but for home games, I guess, well, not just home games, I guess if for certain schools, it could be optional. So it would alleviate some of that. I just don't see how that exposure is any greater than how most of the kids are playing and driving in cars and being around other kids most of the time outside of school. It is a risk. Everything's a risk, but it is a risk assessment. And something that obviously we're just talking about athletics right now, but I would want to make sure that for our next meeting, we do talk about, regardless of what we decide here, we talk about theater and band and choir. I understand when you sing, maybe people have to be spaced out more, but for most of those events, you're not necessarily engaging with other schools if you're in a play or you're having a band concert. And so I do hope we can address and talk about what risk that is or isn't, you know, if the kids are pool testing and we decide that that's an option. But I really think, I don't know, I really feel that the community is at a place, I know cases are up, I'm not denying that. I just think this community is at a place where there has to be some movement, even if it's little, even if it's just, okay, for half the teams we play, they don't have to wear a mask because the other teams have optional, but we require the pool testing and or vaccination. I don't know. I just think I think that's where we are, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm just crazy. I don't know. I just think that's we have to give that a shot. If Omicron shows up and everything goes downhill, we could all end up remote anyway. But I just think that this is not the place where that's going to turn into a super spreader event. You're still requiring, like in other places, you're still requiring all spectators to wear it. You have a designated spot maybe where people can have their concessions, where they can take their mask off and eat, not necessarily right there, and you monitor it. I mean, we really are at that place where nothing is going to be perfect. I mean, it's just, I just don't see the way they're wearing the masks, everything you're viewing, it's working like it should. So I don't know. It's my opinion.
Thanks, Lou. Jen?
I get, and I'm really trying to understand this, but I hear, Lou, when you said, and this is like common that people say, why make them wear masks if they're hanging out together? Why, so I understand that what we ask for kids in schools is not what's happening outside of schools. I understand that, but I don't know if it's the same exposure when someone's hanging out in a car versus playing sports with them. I'm not a doctor. I don't know how differently that is for the exposures. I guess I'd have to ask Dr. Hanna, is there any studies that they have that say the fact that you're playing sports and you're in that physical contact is at a higher risk than just sitting next to somebody or doing other things? So I guess I'd ask that Dr. Hanna, but I guess I come back to the struggle. It's that if it's not going to happen everywhere, then why do we make it happen here? Or if it's not what the kids are doing all the time, what's the point of having them do it here? And I keep thinking, if we can, there's no way for us to say we prevented one COVID or we prevented two COVIDs or we prevented one child from dying. I'm just trying to figure out how, if we can do it even a small percentage of the time, isn't it better than not doing it at all? And I just still struggle with it. And I'm not a parent. And so I always say that first because I don't have that kind of experience that you other parents have. But I guess my question to Dr. Hanna is that, is there any other thing that makes sport, the act of sport, competitive sports, any harder or any more dangerous in transmission than just hanging out?
Well, I think part of it is your mixing of cohorts. So you have kids who are on the same team who might be hanging out with their small group of friends, and yeah, they're together, they're unmasked, but then they are going to come into the basketball group to be exposed to somebody else who is hanging out with their group of friends. And suddenly you've got kids who have unprotected exposure that goes from their 3 or 4 or 5 close friends to suddenly you've got that times however many is on the team. So you are expanding your exposure by expanding your cohort. So yeah, I do think that there's a risk associated with that. Sports is kind of that, it brings together all these different friendship groups into one area where they are, it's sports. So they are expelling a lot of respiratory droplets just by exercising. So, and I would agree with you in the statement that just because it's not perfect elsewhere doesn't mean that we can't try to reduce some risk while they're in the school. I understand that everybody is so tired of COVID. I totally get that. I have a senior in high school. He's tired of it. We as a family are tired of it. I'm tired of it as a physician, but just because you're feeling tired of it doesn't mean you just give up. I mean, using all of our tools to try to protect our kids so that we can, continue to keep them in school, keep them in sports. Let's try to allow them to have some sense of normalcy. And if, keeping sports going and keeping school going means wearing a mask, that seems like a small price to pay to allow those kids to not have a season shut down or have a school shut down.
Thanks, Dr. Hanna. So we need, the action that we're heading to tonight, I guess, is either to affirm our current practice or to recommend changes to our protocol. I think Lorna's point on perhaps the district trying to, secure athletic or masks that are perhaps, adapted to athletic use. I mean, is that something that, certainly there's room in, is Deb still here? Yeah. There's room in the budget somewhere to explore whether or not we can get those, that equipment, basically, we'll call it equipment, and make it available to our students or our athletes. I mean, I don't think, I'm not going to ask for a board action on that, but I think it certainly makes sense that we take that step on behalf of our athletes and see whether we can secure those masks, that additional equipment. But to the broader question, how does the board feel about moving to a point where we can begin to kind of coalesce our discussion and talk about what we're going to do? Are we going to affirm our current practice or look at some modification that we could introduce at this point? And I'd hazard a guess that you're going to revisit this again before the year's out. So, anything we do here is not done for the year, I'm sure. But Lou?
I have a question. So just for sake of argument, what do we have right now? It's track. I understand they have to wear it because it's state mandated. They have to wear their masks.
Yeah.
So we don't have a choice. Even if we said, hey, your pool testing, it's optional, it wouldn't matter for track, right?
It varies facility by facility, but our expectation is that the athletes will be masked because that's what our mandate is right now.
Okay. How many of the schools that we play, either like wrestling or, basketball, are optional versus mandated? Do you know offhand?
Rough guess, 50%. That's rough though.
So 50% of those were playing. So even if we said we're mandating pool testing, we get that advantage, and we make then the mask optional, it would only be for half the games we're playing that they would not be wearing a mask, which then would mean for the times we are wearing a mask, it would make a lot of sense to get better fitted masks that are more comfortable, that they could utilize, that if they're made for sports, maybe it's easier breathing, but then for half the games, they may be able to not have to wear a mask if we voted in that way. But that's the reality of it. Even if it's not like if we said, okay, it's optional if you're pool testing or vaccinated, and now every game is open. It's not going to happen, because the other schools, unless they're changing their mind, are still going to require masks, and that's the rule, right? You go to the more stringent. I just want to get what the real picture would be, even if tonight we said let's change it and do that. That's what we're looking at. Okay, thanks.
Mr. Chairman, are we ready for a motion?
I'm not sure. I'd like just a little bit more discussion.
Where it's almost 8 o'clock, can we just
Yeah.
do that, since we know?
Yeah,
we're gonna go
let's
past 8?
just do a motion to extend the meeting.
I
and then
move to extend the meeting past 8.
Do I have a second? Yeah, okay, Jamie, a motion by Lou, second by Jamie, all in favor? Any opposed? No, okay, thanks. I'm sure many would like to be opposed, but we're not gonna do it. I don't think we should drop a layer of protection is my thought. You know, what the three of you, or Jamie and Lorna and Dr. Hanna, described at the basketball game is that whatever our requirement, the fact of it is that people treat masks, you know, in effect, masks are treated as optional. You know, the refs, you know, if a student or an athlete were to drop his or her mask, the ref isn't going to immediately, you know, push them out of the game. It's not going to affect play in a significant way. I mean, that's kind of what you've described here. So, I mean, I don't think going to an optional mask as a policy would really have that much of an impact. You know, people seem to treat it almost as if it is optional in a manner of speaking. And I just don't think we should, personally, I don't think we should be on record dropping a layer of protection. I like the idea, the thought of having us require pool testing. You know, I'm a little bit concerned about those 50 students again, that you're gonna run into students among that 50. It's very likely you're gonna run into folks who have a real objection to pool testing, and you're gonna have to come up with a way to deal with that from a policy perspective. You know, does that athlete not have an opportunity to participate because they object, or is there some accommodation that we can make? But I do like the thought of adding a layer of protection. There is some information that we need to gather, I think, you know, what the practices of other districts are. I guess we do have to take a vote tonight on whether to affirm or make that change. But you know, if there's an opportunity to put it off to the January meeting, you know, that would be okay with me. I won't be here, but that would be okay with me. But if the motion were to add pool testing but make mass optional, I would vote to oppose that. I just don't want to drop, even if it's not perfect, it's a layer of protection.
And I do just want to say a couple things. One is, in schools, masking isn't perfect. It's pretty good. But our administrators, our teachers are, you know, usually as they get older, the students get older, it's you know, reminding them to pull it up, you know, from time to time. And I also was a little surprised, quite frankly, with the survey, in a way that there was, you over, I think it was maybe around 20 student athletes that expressed concern regarding their own, I guess I would say health and safety. If masks were made optional, again, they could still wear their mask, but I was a little struck by that. That's all.
I think,
Jamie?
I was just going to say, I agree with that, more so the personal comments that were made. Because one of them simply said, I don't care, I just don't want to get sick. I don't know. I go back and forth. It worries me that we immediately start talking about taking away spectators, because I don't want to take any more away from players or our athletes or students that have already lost a lot. I think we, again, have athletes that were doing what they were supposed to be doing. So I want to reiterate that this was not because of Morse High School athletes or BMS athletes who worked really hard to stay masked. I just worried when I saw the part that we don't have control over, exposing them in such a way that was just very blatant. I think we could do better with the temperature in the gym for home games and making sure that there's water available, making sure that the masks are adequate. It's really hard. I go, like I said, I go back and forth. And listening to a pediatrician who I've trusted as a mother for the last 20 years, have a very strong reaction to the consideration of dropping masking. So I don't think, and I think especially because of the new variant that's coming with the holidays that's coming, teachers who are exhausted and afraid, I don't know how we could drop the masks tonight. And that's coming from someone who thought I had already made up my mind to do so. But I don't know that I can in good faith, because of all of the high risks and unknowns. So I don't know. I wish we didn't have to make this decision.
Well, the motion to continue our current practice would be, in effect, a motion to continue with mandatory masking for our athletes. Now, I guess, or any other comments, now I would be, okay, Jen?
I just want to say how much I admire somebody who struggles and who says, I get this from the most deepest part of me, and then says, well, maybe this is I've learned something different, or I've understood something different. So Jamie, I really admire your thought process an awful lot. And I guess I just wanted, my thought was not removing, but reducing spectators would just only help the athletes if they couldn't hear, because it would make it quieter, so they wouldn't be, fighting the masks just to hear what the coaches were saying or to hear what their players were saying or something. So I don't know. I didn't want to say we shouldn't have any spectators. I think it'd be more just how do we create that environment if we were going to have athletes continue to be masked, could we make that place around them any easier for that versus the noise from spectators or the heat from spectators, or just, and also with the concessions, it's just one more thing for our athletic staff to have to focus on, making sure the people who are taking their masks off at concessions are only staying in a small place. I was just trying to think, if we're asking so much around this, that if we just focus on what's the best thing for the athletes themselves, and put all our resources to that, to making them the most comfortable and the best thing for them, like the new masks and the water and everything for their experience while they're competing, just to kind of have that the first priority. But I really admire how everybody on this board is thoughtful and honest and comes from just a really genuine place while we struggle to make these decisions. Thank you.
Thanks, Jen. Well, we could, again, I mean, I don't know how many games there are between now and January. What's that?
Not many.
Not
The
many.
holiday break, not many.
I mean, we could, I'm just throwing out ideas here. We could take a motion to continue our current practice, to ask Nate to come back with suggestions on how to control the environment in the gymnasium, with information on other districts and the practice of pool testing as a mandate, and hopefully some confirmation that we have been able to secure good equipment for our kids on the court and wherever they're competing. And then revisit this again in January. Does anyone have want to take a stronger position than that at this point?
I just think from a management standpoint, we can limit spectators. We can provide a type of mask that's for athletes, but there's going to be a fair amount of athletes that like the one that they went out and got from Under Armour or from, so it's another choice that we can provide to them that we can work with Dr. Hanna with. So we can certainly put those management things, in place, ASAP. We're not doing concessions, correct?
Correct.
So.
Okay. Okay. So does anyone have the chair can't make motions. Does anyone have a motion? I think, we can task Nate and Patrick to come back with some more current information, on what other districts are doing regarding pool testing. I would ask Nate to proactively reach out to the Maine Principals Association and ask them what their reaction's been over the short period of time that schools have been in competition, and if they have any other guidance that they might offer districts. But that for this evening, we affirm the current practice of mandatory masking.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
Go ahead, John. I move that we maintain our current protocols and continue to gather information from other schools and from other districts. And that Nate bring back a report of his experiences with spectators and athletes from our school, of course, where we have control, and the visiting schools. And bring that back to the January meeting.
Okay, we have a motion by Bill. Yep. Jen, comment? And a second by Jen. So now we have discussion on the motion.
Mr. Chairman, I don't think any protocol is perfect. But I think and I've heard here tonight with all of the concerns and the worries and everything else that this board and all of its members are concerned with the health and safety of our kids and our staff. And we got to do what we have to do in terms of protecting our student body and protecting our coaches and our teachers and our administrators too. I don't want to leave you out. And there are just so many things that we can control. You know, the NBA is canceling games. The National Football League's postponing games. Things are getting kind of crazy again. We're going back to where we were maybe a year or 18 months ago. This latest variant is taking off like crazy. Our hospitals are treating record numbers of Maine people. Now, I don't know about pediatric ward, but I know the hospitals themselves and the intensive care units, the respirators. We're going through another surge, and I don't want to relax anything. At the very least, I want to maintain what we've been doing, and hopefully it'll be helpful.
Thanks, Bill. Any other comments? Discussion? If not, I'll call for a vote on the motion. The motion would be to maintain our current protocols and ask for a report on specific elements that we outlined here for the January meeting. All in favor of that motion? All opposed? Okay, so for Vita's purpose, we have 5 in favor, 2 opposed. So the motion carries. Okay, thank you very much. Thanks, Nate.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you all.
Thank you, Dr. Hanna.
I know this isn't easy, so thank you for your thought and your consideration behind this. Thanks. Thanks, Bill.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, board members. 11, oh, yep, sorry, Jen.
Just in view of the additional work that we still have ahead of us tonight and the hour, with all due respect, is there any item that we could move from the remainder of the agenda on to next month? And if there isn't, that's fine. I'm just, I'm cognizant of how much more work we have to do tonight and time.
The only item that I see that could take some time is Bright Space. Is that Katie? Is that you, Patrick, or Dean?
What's that? I know.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but I mean, if that doesn't work, it's fine. I'm just trying to be respectful.
Yeah, let's see how we can move through it for now. Okay. 11.2 personnel items. Patrick?
Yeah, I
Some
just would like to
retirements?
thank these people for their service to our district and to, just education in general. First is Andrea Di Benedetto, a social worker here at Morse, and thank her for 9 years of service to RSU1. Kevin O'Leary, English teacher at Morse, and also the drama person, is 22 years. Thank you, Kevin. Lisa Gastingway, special ed teacher at Phippsburg. She's also been in some other schools, and I'd like to thank Lisa for 13 years of service. And last, Sue Morlock, who is an ed tech at Dyke Newell, for 9 years of service.
Okay, thanks, Patrick. I can't imagine what the Montgomery Theater would be like without Kevin O'Leary there. 11.3, we have our Bright Space presentation. Dean has been waiting patiently, so.
It's okay. Everyone has a copy. I apologize in advance. It's small to read. I understand I condensed it into multiple slides to a page, but I will email you it as a PDF as well, so you can see it on a larger screen. So this evening, what we'd like to do is just tell you a little bit, just to recap, what Brightspace does, so we're all on the same page. The process that we use for improvement of the product and updates, soliciting feedback, training and support, our expectations, and a new piece of it called the Work to Do widget. Okay, and as you have questions, just speak up and let us know. So what Brightspace does, basically, it gives us a single starting point for students as well as for guardians in a lesser degree. It provides them with information about their class, the lessons that are upcoming. It's a place where we can capture things like learning targets and provide context for what they're going to be engaged in. Assignments. Assignments is a loose term. It also involves quizzes and other activities, anything that's graded, basically. And then additional resources that students may need to access in order to complete that work. It provides us with a common platform delivery of curriculum materials so that all students have a similar place that they know that they can go and they can find these materials. And ideally, there'll be consistency from school to school and building to building. Now, it does change over the course of grade levels, and it also does change based on content area. It's difficult to, we have guidelines and recommendations, but there's nothing that really forces us to make people all do it exactly the same. So there is some flexibility there, which is good. I think most people like that because from a teacher standpoint, it allows them to refine how they use the tool so that it meets the needs of their students most effectively. One of the things that it does really for the first time is provide a window into the classroom for parents and guardians. That's something that we didn't have previously. And even just in the last 14 months or so, 15 months that we've been using the product, it's changed and improved. So that's good. We're using it to provide support tools for guided practice staff, basically teachers and ed techs who are in a position where they work with students who need additional supports. We've been able to use the work to do widget that we're going to talk about at the end in new ways. We're really kind of pushing the envelope with this product, using that interface to help faculty assist students with additional supports. And we've also made that available to student services. That required some custom development on our part to make that work, and the feedback so far has been good. Some of the things that we'll be looking as we move forward would be what we call a master class. It's the ability for a teacher as they create their class to create it as a template so that, as an example, next year, with just a few clicks, we can basically import last year's course and have all of the work that they've already completed be available to them. And where we've really seen that make a dramatic improvement is when we've onboarded new staff. The ability to have a new teacher come in and not have conversations that go, well, where is this stored? Where's the curriculum? Is this shared with me? That account has been disabled. How do I get to it? Is really significant. It's also allowed us to do things like onboard long-term subs. And in the current environment, we do this with some frequency. So for them to be able to come in and have access to a class and all the course materials that they need is a big improvement. So those are just a few ways that those efficiencies are paying off for us. Any questions so far? Okay. So the efficiency, the feedback loop that we use, basically last year in particular, in our first year, I mean, this is available all the time, but last year we really did our best to solicit as much feedback early on as we could. And that was done through email, meetings, surveys. And last spring, Katie and Patrick met in each building with groups of staff to talk about how is it going, what do you need, where are the sticking points, where do we have friction, what can we improve, so that we could then take that feedback and try to prioritize it and identify what things can we fix internally and which things do we need to take to the developer, D2L, and say, what can you help us with? So we reviewed that feedback, came up with that list, and some of the changes that we were able to make, which mostly were efficiencies that had to do with how do we make it move faster? Like if a teacher is creating an assignment, how can we do it in fewer clicks? How can we do it inline, which is where basically within the editing window, everything appears that you need without having to set it up here, go somewhere else to make a change, go to another place to then incorporate that change. So So we looked at combining sections, which is basically, if this is for specialists at elementary schools primarily, and then at the high school in particular, where you might have, a teacher who teaches 3 sections of the same course. A year ago, they had to basically take that lesson or assignment, whatever they had created, and they had to then copy it to another section and then copy it to another section, which they could do. They didn't have to recreate it, but they did have to go through that process, and it was several clicks. Instead, we were able to combine those sections into one course, and then using basically sub-rosters, if you will, or sections within that course, they could create something once and then assign it to those sections that needed it at the time that they needed it. And that could be done with content and assignments, as well as with activity feed posts, which is a communications tool that they use to communicate with kids. The expansion and customization of roles, that is a little bit like the work to do widget. Also co-teachers doing a better job of finding out what do our ed techs and supports in the classroom need to have access to. Gradebook automation. One of the things that we were able to do was, again, through customization with our own staff, Matt Fry Davis was able to take the grade settings and push them out to all of the grade books and automate that in advance, which is something that we had done previously with Infinite Campus, but in our first year with Brightspace, we didn't have that ability. It's not something that comes native in the product, so it was something that we were able to create, or he was able to create more accurately. Again, tools for GP, guided practice. And something that we created, we actually, Matt, again, because he's good at this stuff, created an embed tool. It's a widget. It's actually an extension that's in the Google store that people could use, teachers could use, students could use to take a Google Doc and embed it within Brightspace, so that they liked that interface. They liked the ability to see changes and see that document as it's edited, but within the Brightspace window. So that was a product that we developed and that's available to our district. So the next process of that is just to adapt. Like, we put out all of those things. They didn't work for everyone. So we listened to the feedback from staff and made some changes to those things where it was needed. And currently we're engaged in discussions with the developers of Brightspace, D2L, to take a look at basically the gradebook. The gradebook needs work. It's a product that was originally developed for the university systems for post-secondary education. It has expanded into the K-12 or pre-K-12 realm, and it's expanding and doing a lot of development in that area. But it needs some work there. So we're looking at how to add grading periods as well as standards. And then looking at further integration with Google Tools, because our staff like them. And we've spent 5 to 8 years developing Facility with Google Tools, right? And we've got about 14 or 15 months with Brightspace. We've got a lot to learn, and we have a lot of tools that people are accustomed to using and having available to them. So looking at how we can deepen that integration and make it work better for people. And then lastly, they're creating their own handout function. This is it sounds like a small thing, but when you teach a lot of students, the ability to click a button and have it say, make a copy for each student, you can't believe, if we could do one thing, that would make a lot of people happy. Yeah, hi.
So this is pretty similar to the Google Classroom copy, like when every student would receive their own copy of an assignment within.
Yeah, exactly right. So what he's referring to is in Google Classroom, there was a function called basically you could make a copy for every student. When you made it, you clicked a button and it just assigned a new copy of the product of that document to everybody who was on the roster. And so Brightspace is looking at adding that same functionality. All right. So moving on to training and support. We have a Brightspace leadership group, which is basically comprised primarily of teachers, as well as some specialists and administrators, but primarily teachers. We thought that it would be most helpful to have teachers have a peer group who really is doing the same work that they're doing on a regular basis, because they're doing it. They understand one another. They know the language. They know the pressures and frustrations that they experience, and they're best in position to help one another. So we've got a great Brightspace group there that's worked, some of them since the beginning. That group also acts as liaison between technical support and the schools, leads training sessions in their respective schools, whether that's Late Start Wednesday or one-on-ones or after-school sessions, and they answer questions and support their peers. That group does a great job for us. It's been terrific. More formal training, or the formal training that they provide, is also done in our first PD days back at the beginning of the school year. We dedicate significant time at that time to bring people up to speed on what are the changes that we were able to provide over the summer. Late Start Wednesdays and staff meetings. And then obviously our own technology department and our integration, Bob Jordan, we're available to help with people, help people with these tools all the time. As far as our expectations for this year, what we asked everyone to do, all teachers, was to use the activity feed at least once a week, but basically to use that activity feed because it's one of the things that provides context for the work that's going to get done. And it's something that the guardians can see. Guardians, as an example, there's a section for announcements, but a guardian doesn't see the announcements. But they do see the activity feed. So the activity feed is a place where they can post, hey everybody, this is week such and such. This is what we're going to be doing. This is our, here are our goals. This is what we hope to learn. This is where you'll find the different resources that we're going to be using over the course of the week. Now that's all work that teachers were already doing. They were creating learning targets. They're putting it in a Google Doc. So some people are just adding that as a link inside their activity feed. For an elementary school teacher, that might be something that they're putting into a weekly newsletter, and they're just basically copying it and putting it into that space. But again, what we're trying to do is find one place where people can begin, and then from there, get to all the resources that they might need. So the activity feed, assignments, basically anything that needs to be graded, anything that's required, okay? There are lots of ways that you can distribute information through Brightspace in addition, but if it doesn't need to be graded, then it doesn't necessarily need to be an assignment. That's really kind of the defining decision there, I think. Announcements, if applicable, but again, with the caveat that parents don't see that. And then the content widget, which is a way for teachers to organize the course material. And some teachers, especially at the high school, they love the content widget because they teach everything from it. They literally say, we're in week 12, go to week 12 in the content widget, and they literally can see within that, here are the readings, here are the labs, here's the activities, or whatever it might be. We tried to make, again, the expectations are different at different grade levels. In the elementary schools, they might be using this as a landing place because from here we have a navigation bar, and in that navigation bar, students, basically there's a bunch of links there that are for classroom resources that they can access whether they're in school or at home. So they may be using it as a landing page. They use the activity feed as a place to make guardians and students aware of what they're going to be doing this week. And then they use that landing page as basically you log into Brightspace, and from there you can click on those resources, and generally it automatically logs you into those resources when you follow the links, and it means that they're not answering questions about where do I find this? My child can't find that. That's the idea. And then lastly, one of the things that they revamped this year was, or created a new version of, is called the Work to Do widget. And this is what a guardian sees, as well as a student. What was nice about this was that the student and the guardian see the same thing now when they go to this Work to Do widget. Previously, the parents and the students had different views, and it was very difficult to support them because they didn't see the same information presented similarly. So while the student now sees the full Brightspace course, which the parent doesn't, they both do get access to the Work to Do widget. And what you might have you might struggle to see it because of the size of it here, but when I email you the PDF, you'll be able to look at it. It basically shows you a 2-week snapshot of any work that's overdue or upcoming. And you can click to expand that and then change the date range. So you can look forward or backwards to see what your student is missing or what they might have upcoming. You can get feedback and grades. If you click on that, it'll show you all the grades that they've received so far, as well as any teacher feedback. It'll show you the activity posts, which we talked about a little bit previously. And it'll also show you the portfolio. Now, the portfolio is a product that's built into Brightspace that allows a teacher to identify exemplars of student work that parents can also see. There are other even more creative ways to use it. Some schools are using that outside of RSU1 as a messaging tool because parents can see it. It comes through on the app. They can view it on their phone. Gives them a notification. And they're using that as a way to distribute information. Like if they had a newsletter, they might put it in as a portfolio item, and they can decide, with a couple of clicks, they can just push that out to the entire class so that all of the guardians would get it through the portfolio. So it can also be used as a communications tool. So, questions? Hi.
Thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome.
And I know we have a lot of work to do, but just a couple quick things. There is still inconsistency with staff usage, which as a parent, I'm learning, and my children will tell me who, some really just love the Google Classroom and that's what they're going to use. Some have more paper that they prefer using. So as far as for example, on the work to do widget, I can see Spanish and algebra might be more really invested in it, whereas it might be pretty quiet in other classes. And I know you're making progress on that, but that is something that's been a little difficult to navigate. And then there's some assignments that are overdue that just kind of hang out. I don't know, is there progress on some things that maybe weren't really overdue, but they kind of still show up as overdue? That seems to be happening less, but it does still happen. There's no way to make it go away.
Well, the teacher can. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, really, it's basically when you see something that's overdue that's actually been passed in, what that means is that we just need to go in and help that person clean up the data.
Okay. And then the other thing too is, and again, we don't have much time, but there seems to be a real disparity in performance between the Chromebooks, and it could just be by grade, but at the high school level, there's a big time delay on loading content between on the Chromebook compared to, for example, on my MacBook. We'd even taken a side-by-side video of loading the same thing. I'll be trying to load on his account, and he's also signed in. And so, I know that we're buying these for, their workhorses as far as they're solid. But that, with so many students with IEPs and struggles with patients and such, do you ever see that changing, or is that just sort of the price we pay for buying something that's a little more rugged?
Well, I mean, I think that the Chromebook is definitely not, speed is not our primary factor when we're putting together a device selection. It's one of the things, certainly. We want it to be adequate. We want it to be responsive and better for students, and we don't want them to be frustrated with it. But it's a $380 device versus your $799 to $1,200 device, and there will definitely be differences.
They're pretty significant. I was just struck by the significant speed factor.
And there are lots of factors there too. I mean, we'd have to take a look at that particular device and see, are there things that we could do to update it? Are all the OS updates done? How many tabs are open? How many windows are open with how many tabs? When was the last time it was restarted? I mean, there's so many different variables. It's very hard to guess, but we could certainly, it's one of the things that we need to do though, in terms of training students and helping them regardless of what the device is, because whether it's a Windows, Mac, Chromebook, there are certain things that you can do when you notice that you're seeing a performance lag, that you can do to improve the performance. Not that that's ever going to turn that,
Right.
Chromebook into your MacBook, but
The last thing I was going to ask is, we were talking about speed, but shoot. It just went right out of my head. It doesn't matter. I mean, I'm glad to see there's been some progress on it. But Jonah uses it every day, and I just try to do my best as a parent to, without helicoptering. But I think the hard thing as a user, as a parent, is that, clearly there's still some buy-in from other staff versus some staff still don't have the buy-in. And so we're just trying to have to navigate that. Certainly if we end up remote, this is where we have to be, but it's been a learning curve at home for sure.
Well, and I think we've taken staff who had, as we said, 5 to 8 years of development with a product. I mean, they had a product that they really knew that maybe didn't meet the needs of our full constituency when we looked at it. There was no visibility for parents. There were lots of limitations. Everything required double entry. You put it into Google, and then you also had to put it into IC. But everybody knew how to use it. And we're trying to deploy this at a time that maybe in hindsight, we have asked a lot of people to do this at this time. And maybe it's been a bigger lift than even we had anticipated. We knew it was going to be hard, but it may have been that it was even harder than we thought it would be.
Oh, yes, and I thought of my last thing, is that, in fact, parents and I have even talked, like, we try not to get into the texting, like, what do you mean this is overdue? Or how come this isn't great? So there has to have been, as a parent, there needs to be like a settling down to let things hit Infinite Campus or not be in the student's face about, because there is, again, it's just kind of inconsistent, but something might have been turned in, especially if it's paper, completely on time, but it might look like it's not. And so that's been a big learning curve and kind of a joke among the parent group that I'm in. It's just like, don't send the text about how come this is overdue. That's the helicoptering that
Well, but
is
that's
not
a
healthy.
great point, because, previous to this, there was always this delay. Like, I could put it into Google Classroom and I could assign this work and you could pass it in. And I then, until it showed up in Infinite Campus, for the Guardian, it never existed. You didn't see it. You didn't know what the grade was. You didn't know when it was due. And so there was lots of changes that could take place. The issue that happens with Brightspace is that it's utterly transparent. Whatever you type in is what gets reported, and it gets reported instantly. So if you make a mistake, or if it doesn't work the way that you expected it to, everybody sees it and everybody knows. And it's a huge change. And while we're getting people trained and while they're getting accustomed to that and getting more comfortable, like a year ago, people were really like, oh my gosh, this is late. And they were frustrated. And maybe, I took calls last year from parents who were frustrated because they were having arguments with their students when in fact the kid passed it in. I mean, it wasn't really their fault. And I have far fewer of these now, partly because the staff are getting better and better at it every week. Students are better at it, and parents are also maybe a little bit more patient in realizing that sometimes it just takes a little bit longer. But if you have something that's languishing, you can let us know and we can reach out to the teacher, or you can let the teacher know. I mean, if you're seeing something that's, that is passed in and you already have a grade for it, but it still shows up, that can get cleaned up. It's just usually something's not clicked in the right place.
Thank you. And I'm glad to hear. I hope the teachers are warming up to it, because I know it's been a big ask, like you said, it's been a big ask. And for some teachers, it's just been another huge obstacle to get used to.
Okay, thanks, Lorna. Jonah?
So I know that limiting double entry between like a learning interface and Infinite Campus was one of the main goals of Brightspace. And I appreciate the sort of synchronization between the two. But I know you're communicating with D2L. I was wondering if there was any progress being made on maybe improving that integration such that I could see individual grades in Infinite Campus?
So right now, when your assignments are submitted and graded in D2L, overnight they get moved over. And so you should be seeing your individual grades in Infinite Campus for assignments. Oh, I see what you mean. I'm sorry. Yeah. No, I think actually what will end up happening is once the gradebook in D2L is fully fleshed out so that it meets our needs, instead what you'll be seeing is you'll get your running CUME in D2L as instead of in IC. The only thing you'll need Infinite Campus for would be demographics information, attendance information, and transcript information.
The other thing I wanted to ask is, my mom being a teacher, I know there's some, and me being a student, I mean, sometimes there's difficulties viewing inline feedback for assignments, and sometimes it's hard to find an explanation for a grade you might have gotten. So I was wondering if there was a way to, I know with the Google embed now, you can see comments on Google Docs, which is a lot easier for assignments that are submitted that way, but maybe for like text or PDF submissions, is there a way that it might be easier for teachers to leave and students to see feedback?
There are annotation tools built into the gradebook, into the grading tool, and there are rubrics as well. So I think that those tools are there. I think it's a function of us learning how to use them and promoting them. Right now, we've really been focused on sort of these core basics. And I think there's a lot more growth that we can do if we provide the right training and work with staff and students to find out, like what are the priorities? Like, is that the next thing that we should be addressing? And then putting resources into that. Yeah.
As a final note, is Brightspace kind of a novel tool for like high school level?
I don't know what year. It's been around for a while. And in fact, there's an entire province in Canada that selected it for all their high schools a couple of years ago. So it's just that it's originally it was designed for post-secondary. Yeah.
Okay, any other questions for Dean? Yeah,
I just have a
Jamie?
quick comment to thank you for the work to do widget, which is something I think everyone will probably get a lot of use out of. And one of the announcements. Why don't parents see those? It seems counterintuitive to me to have an announcement because typically you would put something important in there. That
I
parents
agree.
would be able
And
to see that.
yeah, I agree with you. And we have had many conversations with them about like, what's the purpose? There's also this overlap, like when do I use announcements versus the activity feed? And they view the announcements, their design philosophy is that the announcements are really for the participants in the course and that the activity feed, because it generally is more to do with the work of the course. And that's where they think the guardians would go. So what we're basically trying to do is just work with staff and really just emphasizing that if you want a parent to see it, it has to go into the activity feed. But I agree, I don't understand that. The other thing that I like about the announcement is that you can subscribe to notifications with it. So you can get a notification. They're adding that, I believe, to the activity feed because of some of that feedback.
Sure.
But yeah.
Yeah, and I'm a pretty visual person, so I would have loved to have seen it in like on a presentation, but maybe we can do that next time, just to be able to see the changes. But yeah, that's.
Sure.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Jamie. Any other questions or comments? Yep, Jen?
And this one's more for Katie, I think, is that, is there a baseline best practices set out as a requirement for each grade level? But I mean, like, I think that's how I think Dee made a good point by saying it's used very differently across grade levels. But is there a clear best practice guideline for teachers so they're fully aware of if they're using it with the frequency or whatever to a certain level across our entire district?
Yeah, there are grade level expectations for each group. And I think, even as we get better at this, what I would add about that is there are Some people are going to always meet the basic expectation, especially if they're not, and then they're reminded. But I think it's more, how much do people use an interface in their classroom? Like, some people just truly are still, might be meeting the minimum, like Lorna was saying, but might always love to have papers in kids' hands and be doing things in a different way, and might not ever use Brightspace in that way. And so I think it is, in listening to a lot of the comments, I think we want to be careful that we're creating something that's helpful for people at home, but we don't want to hinder the freedom and creativity that teachers use in their classrooms to make students learn the best that they can. So I think it is an interesting balance, but there are some basic expectations.
Okay, thanks. Any other comments? No? Thank you, Dean. Thanks for pulling it together. Okay, 11.4, we have first reading of two board policies. 11.4, well, yeah, 11.4A, CBI, evaluation of superintendent and IHBAC child fine policy. These are first reading, so any comments or questions, they can go back to the personnel or the policy committee, and they'll come back to you January for action. Okay. 12.0, next meeting date and location. The next regular board meeting is Monday, January 24th, and it will be held here at the high school at 6 o'clock. We do have need for an executive session, and we'll be returning to regular session, but I don't anticipate any action beyond the action we've taken to this point. So I'd like a motion to go into executive session pursuant to 1 MRSA 405-6C to discuss disposition of property. Do I have a motion? Motion by Bill, second by Lou, all in favor? Any opposed? No? I assume we're going into the,
No, Damien, we can stay right here, right? It's just gonna take a minute.
okay.
Well,
Okay, we're out of executive session, back into regular session. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Motion from Bill, second by Lorna. All in favor? Ayes all around. Thank you very much. Good night.